So let's get started. So this is our panel for today. We've got the lovely Diane Heddish. She is mom to Lauren. And Lauren is, I already wrote the ages down here. Lindsay.
I'm mom to Lauren too, but.
You're mom
Lindsay
to Lauren
is
and
my
Lindsay.
LGS one.
Oh, good grief.
That's okay.
Can I go home now? Like, is it bedtime yet? Lindsay, okay, mom to Lindsay, her LGS girl. And Lauren too, but not the LGS gal. Who's 28, and they live in Illinois. And then we have Karen, who you've already met, mom to Dan, who's 36. They live in Ohio. We have some dads up here. We've got John Gilmore, mom to Lily, who's 21. They live in Pennsylvania. Right? I'm not getting more names wrong, right? We got Fred, who is one of our LGS Leaders in LGS Award winners from last night. Father to Brian, who's 43. Sorry, John, you're actually not a mom, you're a father. I'm really tired, you guys. At this point, I'm just, Hey, Brian.
I wasn't going to say anything.
How you doing? Have you come to gaze lovingly into my eyes again? So, great story about Brian while he's up here. He's adopted. His mama, Taylor, running around right there, chose Brian and LGS. So, I should have a hand round of applause. Are you looking for your child? He's right here. He's going to help me announce these guys. Fred Rodel, father to Brian, 43, who passed away about 5.5 years ago after living 40 plus years with LGS. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Tiffany Cadena. She is mom to Lily. We have two Lilies up here. And Lily is 19, and they live in Texas. Hey, Brian. So let's get us started. I want to kick this off. We're going to be talking about, we're going to try to pack into 1 hour community, school, home, and family. So I want to get us started. You know, I know this is just one fraction of the subway map, but I want to start talking about school, because Jen just started on school. Tiffany, can you take it away and tell us a little bit about Lily's journey with school, with IEPs, and you know, the way that you've managed things? Hey, Brian. Hi. Come here, big guy. Yeah, that's Tiffany. She's awesome. Come on, big guy. All right. Here's your mama. Let's go.
I have a little bit of a double
Hi, big guy.
perspective on the schools and IEPs and that, because I'm also a teacher. So I teach 8th grade, and so I was very blessed that my Lily could come to school where I'm at. And I had her there, just pushed it, because I teach middle school. So for just as long as I possibly could until high school. At the high school point here in the state of Texas, where I live, the schools are very large and the paras are wonderful, but it's about 3 kiddos to 1 paraprofessional. So I chose to actually sign my kiddo out of school at 16 years old, and she is at home with dad. IEPs are wonderful. Our schools are wonderful. And like she said before, just talk to them. Just say, you know what, I don't understand this. I don't get this. Please help me. They are wonderful. But there are other options. You can do that. You can sign your child out and have them at home. For us, because of safety reasons, because her drop seizures were intense, it was the right option for us. So I have a little bit, I've seen it from both sides, put it that way.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I wish we had known all of the different options out there, and as we embark, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the session, onto what the future looks like for Savannah and the Dans, it's great to see that the options that are out there. Karen, you're a school principal too, so you also see it from both sides. And Dan, can you tell us a little bit about Dan's experience with school, IEPs, and all that good stuff?
Sure. Well, we're very fortunate to live in a really excellent school district, so the teamwork was strong from the get-go. My thought always is build a team with your school professionals. Not everyone, most people don't understand LGS out of the gate, and it's our job to educate that team so that they really deeply, deeply understand what is needed. We had a fortunate situation where we also kind of redshirted him along the way, kept him in elementary school a little bit longer, kept him in middle school a little bit longer, kept him in high school till they kicked us out the door. And they would literally build an environment for him. Aides or paras are really another part of the challenge because of safety for our kiddos. So, you know, like bus safety, safety at, school, or even going down the hall to the restroom or the changing area. How are we going to be doing all of that? So we just constantly built team with our folks. Interestingly enough, Dan's middle school aide loved him so much that he came over and hung out with him on the weekends and saw a picture on the refrigerator of our niece, and he said, I'm gonna meet that girl, I'm gonna marry her. And he did. So you never know, right?
You never know. Oh, I love that. I was a lot like Jen Griffin, where when I went into our first IEP, I didn't really know what we were doing there. And I think I can just describe, our first 5 years with LGS as just utterly stunned. We had therapists telling us that she was going to be intellectually disabled, and I'm like, gosh, she's like 3. How do you know, right? I'm like, can we, she's never going to graduate high school. I'm like, she's 3. Can we just take it one day at a time here? And we've had really varied school experiences. And we were told in the beginning, you need to fight for everything. You need to go in there and demand this and demand that. I'm like, but wait a minute. The people that come into this just want to help, right? And I want to work with this team. And yeah, there are times, I think, where you have to get a little more assertive. We learned that over the years. But we ultimately found a way, and I found the more we kept it, the team grounded, the people that actually knew this child, they always wanted to do the right thing. It was always sort of the burden of maybe the district or a funding, people who didn't know Savannah, who wanted to change the system. But it was always a challenge, getting a one-on-one aid, and schools, gosh, there's so much concrete. Why does there have to be so much concrete at schools where you just pad it, right? And so we'd send her off into this concrete wonderland, wondering what was going to happen to her on a day. And we just had good experiences, even though we struggled. We were there, she had an aide who was very senior, and the union is very powerful in our district, and that aide got the most hours, and Savannah had the most hours. But this woman was very, very overweight and very, very elderly and really couldn't run after Savannah, and Savannah was a runner. And Savannah had a seizure one time in the sandbox and inhaled some sand, which is much worse, to have during a seizure. And we were able to, this person can't be Savannah's aide, and had to really go up against the union, and that was no fun. We also had to go up against, the nurses with Diastat. I know Dr. Ches talked about this, but Diastat in California became this really political issue of this is how we get nurses back into schools, right? And so nurses were saying, only we can give it, and parents are saying, well, that I'm giving it, I'm not a nurse, right? So that, and then we also had to get really activated because Savannah has a seizure response dog, and in high school, and it was like, she can't have that dog here, and it turns out when you drill down, it was because the aides couldn't be asked to pick up the poop. I'm like, oh, well, we can handle poop, right? But you kind of get to the bottom of the issue, and are able to work with them. So I strongly suggest really trying to work with the schools. Let's talk a little bit about the different kind of therapies. And I know some of the therapies are in school and some of them are external, but John, can you tell us a little bit about Lily and her journey and all of the many therapies, speech, OT, PT, texture, you name it.
Yeah, so Lily did go to school for a couple of years, did give that a try, and we decided after several years that the best thing for Lily was to homeschool her. And really, she was having seizures all the time, finding out that they were just really having her in a chair and just having her sit in a corner. And we one time went in and the teacher's like, I think she's starting to have behavioral issues. And we're like, she's a mellow kid. We're out. We're to do this at home. And they agreed with us. Let's do the homeschooling. So she did that from probably 7 until she was just 21 this year. So all those years, it was, you had the teacher, you had OT, PT, speech, and really the OT, we became very good friends with. She was Lily's OT from preschool until May, so all those years, and got to know them. And, it was beneficial because they could work around Lily's schedule. Lily would have a seizure, we'd call them, hey, can you come a half hour later? And they not always can because they have schedules, but maybe they can come the next day and things like that. And you really saw Lily, I think she thrived much better doing it at home. Now, doing it at home with all therapy is you don't have socialization with other kids and all that. So
I think you went off. Smack it a little bit. That's what I do. I just.
Okay.
Smack.
That was good. It worked. That was really good.
It's pretty impressive.
So, I mean, through that, we made sure she got involved. We did hippotherapy, horseback riding. We took her to events, and we did, in wintertime, we did adaptive snow skiing. That was about an hour away from us. An organization, they would do summertime skiing or tubing. We took her to that. And so we have a lot of families. So you do other things outside of that to socialize with that. But for us, that was very beneficial, and the therapies really did help out.
Great. Diane, tell us about Lindsay, not Lauren, Lindsay, and her journey, with all of the different therapies. And tell us a little bit about her and how well she's doing these days. Are you there?
Sure, this is on, right? Where is it?
It's right there.
Okay, good. Lindsay's 23. A lot of transitions during the last few years. It's been difficult, but I guess that we're becoming pros at transitions. So we had to transition from a pediatric facility to an adult medicine facility. And in the middle of COVID, that was a challenge. We did find a hospital that was able to use a social worker to coordinate the effort and have it all done like at one consult, where we went over each specialist she had, and they matched up with the specialist that they had that was going to provide the best care. And then they set up the appointment, so that part was easy. I think the hardest part about that was, in our particular case, and I don't know if it's like that all the time, is they didn't give us very much notice that we were going to need to transition, because she was getting her epilepsy services through an epileptologist who we loved, and we kept saying, is she going to have to age out of this children's hospital? And they kept saying, we'll let you know, or no, we'll let you know. And then one day after when she was 22, just aged out of school, day before her 22nd birthday, we live in Illinois, they said, okay, we're not going to be able to treat her anymore. So I guess I'm just the type of person that needed a little more notice on that. Also, she transitioned from being in school, to being home, and COVID, as you know, didn't help. Another transition that we just did within the last year is something that we worked towards for the last probably 10 years, is we transitioned her into a residential placement, which we kind of had envisioned that we were going to do down the road when we were older. Came up sooner than we thought. That was the hardest decision that I've ever had to make. I was an educator in a rehab facility, worked with developmental disability adults, and used to encourage them and counsel them to get your adult child on a list, to know that you're not going to be able to care for them forever, and that you still have a life that you would like to lead, and kind of pick up where you left off. But never until I had to experience it myself did I realize how hard it was going to be. But it has been good, and it has been a rough road. And there's a lot of tweaking that still needs to be done. But I think overall, it was the right decision. And just on that note, I just want to share to keep an open mind about that always. My older one, who's 28 now, when she was 8, she's very mature, and very nurturing and loving. When she was 8, she said, you know, Mom, when Lindsay gets older, I'm not going to be able to take care of her because I'm going to have my own life. And that, the maturity that I heard in that, but the reassurance also that she could decide that already and that she could share that with Lindsay's other siblings, that it isn't truly their responsibility, and it shouldn't be unless they want it.
Thank you. And you don't have to hold it. I think they fixed it, so you can
Great,
just.
thank
But if you turn your head like this from here to this way,
Okay.
then you can't hear it. So just look
Thanks,
straight forward.
sweetie.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you bring up a really good point. So how many of your kids, raise your hand, have a hard time transitioning? Just one of you? Two? Just two of you? Lily does great with transitioning. Lily? Okay, great. Well, we need to know their secret. Yeah. A lot of our kids have a hard time transitioning, and whether that's transitioning from, going to this room, to that room, or going from, hey, I'm hanging out at home, to going to the store, or transitioning. We talk about transitioning at school, right, from elementary to middle to high school, right, and then out of high school and into the world. And then we also talk about transitioning as it relates to medical care, right? Starting out in the pediatric setting and then going to the adult setting. And a lot of kids have a hard time with transitions. And in the school setting, it's really easy. And this is, I think, what I wish I had known. If the IEP team, of which you are a key and important member, and your child is the most important member, and it's the teacher and the people within the community that know your child, and then probably one or two people from the district and higher up. If the IEP team deems something necessary and appropriate for your child, if the recommendation of that team coming out of that meeting is this will happen to make the transition to work, to make the school year successful, the district has to provide it by law. And that is the biggest thing. So you want to work with your team to really figure out what is going to work for your child. And if that is coming out and doing homeschool, great. If that is being fully integrated and going to school every day, that's great. If it ends up being like what my child had, where in the beginning she was fully included because she picked up on everybody's behaviors, right? The good behaviors, the bad behaviors. There was a girl in her class with Rhett that would wring her hands and scream, and Savannah in kindergarten learned to wring her hands and scream. So we would, spend a lot of time in regular ed. But then as the years went on, we would have some time in regular ed and some time in special ed because she didn't read or write. And then in high school, she was fully in special ed for all curriculum, but then was out at lunch, and she would go to rallies, and she was out at recess and things like that. So, whatever that looks like, it needs to be provided. So work with your team, I think, to find that. But you raise a good point about these transitions. John, so you said that Lily doesn't struggle with transitions. What is the secret?
The only thing she struggles with is is summer into fall when she can't swim anymore. Pool.
Gotcha.
Transition, she's mad.
Yes,
with
okay,
that.
gotcha.
I think our lilies are related. That's mine too.
Trace, I don't think there's anything that we've done. I think Lily just goes with we're very lucky in that, and she goes with the flow. And I think with transition, it's good. We keep a very strict schedule with Lily, and so they're, I guess we probably don't have a lot of major transitions. They're minor, or try to keep it somewhat consistent with her, which is.
She knows what to expect. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, how would you feel if you're sitting there playing with your blocks and somebody comes in and goes, hey, let's go to the store now, and you're like, wait a minute. My husband does this to me all the time. I think it's the whole Marine thing in him, like barks orders and expects immediate, obeying of the commands, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you put yourself in that position, but you have a really strict schedule, I could see how that.
Yeah, and we know times that we can transition, she'll be fine. Other times that, we learned over time that she won't like that, or this is a time that she's usually tired, so let's not make a big change to something else. Let's keep it, keep her home, or let's not all of a sudden like, okay, we're gonna go out or something like that. So I think that's helped us over time.
That's the key. Well, we've talked about this transition, and we'll come back, because I feel like it's like we started kind of early school, and then we jumped like to, oh, now they're adults. We'll come back to that in a second, but I want to keep on this idea of placement and aging, since it's come up already, and I know, Diane, you just talked about a really challenging thing that you guys did by putting Lindsay into a home, and how's that working for you, and that was the right thing for her with her medical care, and the right thing for your family as you're getting older. Fred, you have a really interesting story about the transition. You've seen a lot on 43 years with your son. You've seen a lot, but you have a really beautiful story about his placement as an adult that I'd love for you to share.
Sure. I think one of the things I'll say right at the beginning is that when we were raising Brian, he had the disabilities that everybody has with LGS. We've talked about them for the last 3 days. But what we tried to focus on also about Brian was not only his disabilities, but his abilities. What could he do, and what did he enjoy, and what fit his personality to give him the best life that he possibly could have. And one of the things that we noticed early on was his desire to form relationships. He wanted his independence to a certain degree, and that was manifested into his running. Like everybody talks about a runner. Brian was a runner. He would run out of our house, and he would go down the street to the neighbors. Didn't matter what neighbor it was, and he would just open the door and walk in and sit down with the family in their family room, watch TV with them, or whatever they were doing. And we noticed that a lot in that that was him telling us that he wanted his independence to a certain degree. So we kept him at home until he was 20. He graduated from high school in the special ed program. And then when he was 20, we started thinking about, what is the next phase for Brian, and what would make his life better than it is now? And staying home with mom and dad and having a limited circle of friends wasn't really the thing that we envisioned for Brian based upon his personality. So we made the tough decision with a lot of vetting and a lot of investigation on finding a residential location for him that would suit his personality and would make his life better. So we ended up working with a local social service agency that provided support for people with disabilities, living support with people with disabilities. And in order to make sure that that was the right agency for us, my wife got on their board of directors, I got on their board of directors, and we really made sure that this was the right place for Brian. And fortunately it was, and so Brian moved into a group home, one of the homes that the agency supported. And he moved in with 4 other roommates. That was the toughest day of our lives for him to make that transition. But we just said we were going to do it and see how it went. And it was probably one of the best decisions we made, because he just flourished in that home in terms of making friendships with his roommates. And we insisted that he get out into the community as much as possible to have a social life, because he loved to be social. He loved to go out to eat and things like that. And so we made arrangements for that to happen. So we lived in that group home for about 9 years. And then we noticed another change for him, that he really needed more one-on-one care than he was getting in the group home. And so we investigated all of the other opportunities and alternatives, and we discovered that the funding that he was getting provided for supported living in his own apartment. So he transitioned from a group home into his own apartment. Again, he took 2 roommates with him his friends from the group home, and they set up house in an apartment, 3 of them living there, and of course they had 24/7 care. And we made sure that, obviously the social service agency could handle the seizures. All 3 roommates had seizures, so there was some commonality there in terms of their The other two weren't LGS diagnosed, but they did have a lot of seizures too. And so that worked out for about another, I guess, 7 or 8 years. And then again, you go in these phases, and it's an evolution. And we got to the point where, hey, these places that we could find with Section 8, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Section 8 funding for rental, to provide apartments or living conditions for low-income people. That type of funding had to be secured by apartment owners or homeowners who would agree to the Section 8 funding. And that was always difficult to find in a lot of areas. And most of the locations that we found Section 8 housing was not in the most desirable places to live. So we found ourselves kind of having to move Brian every 2 or 3 years in order to improve where he was living. It wasn't terrible, but it was kind of the locations weren't desirable. So to make a long story short, I started looking into home ownership for Brian. I just kind of envisioned him living in a neighborhood like everybody else lives in, and for him to develop friendships with his neighbors and thriving in that kind of environment. So I looked into buying a home myself for Brian, and then we also looked into have Brian buy his own home, and looked into loans for people with disabilities. There were a lot of roadblocks in that. And again, make a long story short, finally I discovered Habitat for Humanity. And I started talking to them. They had no clue in helping people with disabilities, especially having 3 unrelated people living in the same house, because their mission is solely focused on helping families. If you're not familiar with Habitat, they provide homes for low-income people, and they provide a 30-year mortgage for that home at no interest for the 30 years. So it's pretty attractive financially. And of course, Brian and his roommates were low income, certainly. And so there were some hurdles for them to overcome to accept Brian into their program. He got rejected a couple times from our applications. So I had to go back and modify the applications and assure them that, they would take care of the property, and we would be able to make the payments based upon the rent of the other 2 housemates. Anyway, that gets into a lot of detail. But the bottom line is they accepted us into the program, and they designed a fully accessible house for Brian and his 2 roommates, roll-in showers, a ramp to get into the home, the whole thing. And he moved in, and it was the happiest day of his life, I think. He didn't really talk a lot about it, but the smile on his face kind of demonstrated that it was happiest day. Anyway, it worked out very well. We provided the sweat equity to build a house. I spent every Saturday for about 3 months going out and building a house, which I've never done in my life before, and didn't know anything about that, but was provided that support to help. So that's kind of our journey with regard to residential services. And again, it's all based upon, we felt, Brian's desire to have his own independent life as much as he possibly could. And I recognize that's not the way for everybody. Every family has to make their own decision in that regard, but we felt like it was the best way for Brian. So.
We see this right now with Savannah, who's 29. I mean, she still loves us, but if you were at the dance last night, I got a lot of talk to the hand from her because she didn't want mama. She wanted to go dance with her friends, right? And, I love what you said about really looking for the signs. We see the signs in Savannah. And before COVID, we had her in therapeutic horseback riding and Special Olympics. And we had an active life and community, right? Because she's out of school now. And we were going out and meeting friends. And we started to see her wanting to leave less and less and less. But this, it's like, yeah, but you have to socialize. You have to get out there. You have to get exercise. And so now she's in none of those things. And she's so happy. you know, and so we've built it around, she's a homebody, she's kind of introverted, although she can be extroverted at times. She loves to be in her house with her puzzles and her stuff and her dog and her iPad, but then people come and visit her, and she loves that. And I remember the first time about 6 years ago, I met a family, because we were looking at programs, and every program we've looked at is like, oh, hell no, we're not putting her in that, right? I mean, that is just not right for her. And I met a family, and they said, yeah, we do home-based care. So our daughter is in our home, and we have staff come in. And I just have to thank the pioneers like you and these people who have already kind of navigated this. It's by no means structured, but at least you've given us ideas, because prior to, you know, most of the people with LGS that are in their 50s or older are in institutions. And sometimes they're in institutions for the elderly, sometimes they're in institutions for like the medically fragile. But our generation are the ones that really have been keeping our kids home, right? And more integrated in the community. And so we're having to solve this problem now. And so we're sort of standing on your shoulders to look. But our pipe dream for Savannah is to keep the house that she's in right now and bring in tenants, right, for her that would live with her, and those would be her roommates, and there'd be 24-hour care. And then we would live across the street in this dream house that I just don't know how I'm going to buy, but I really want it. It just has this beautiful tree out front that I love, right? So I'm just buying the tree. Let's just be real. Because what I see in her is a desire to spend a lot of time with us, and we're her stability, and she wants to be with us, but she also wants her space. So I think it's really important, this concept of really listening to them in their communication, but then also listening to the siblings, because, you know, I love my son, but I'm not sure he can really take care of himself yet. He's 30 years old, I love him, and to put that care on Savannah, none of us want to do that to the siblings. So, John, what do you guys think about when you think about Lily's future and placement, when you and Natalie maybe aren't able to care?
She just turned 21 in April, and so, you know, we're in the process right now of thinking about that, and not just thinking, you think about it all the time. You know, we both just turned a little over 50 last year. Sorry, Natalie, giving that up.
I tried, Natalie.
Yeah. So, you know, we're kind of right now of, you know, we want to keep her home as long as we're healthy and we're able to, and we're lucky. I mean, she's, you know, 5'3", she's petite, so, you know, I'm fine with moving her around and having to do that. But obviously, as we get older, it's gonna get to that. So, you know, we're still searching for the answer. We don't have the answer what we're gonna do. And this is, you know, where over the years coming to this conference, when Lily was younger, and you hear from folks like Fred and Dale and Jeff Groff of, you know, what they've experienced, and, you know, you take that to helped us with guardianship, helped us at 21, and now hearing what Fred did with Brian and all that. You take that and kind of think about it and try to form, and now and I, you know, from there try to figure out what we're gonna do. But I don't have the answer right now. That's, you know.
Hey, I was in denial for a good 25 years.
Yeah.
So it's good there. Yeah, welcome to the denial. No, but it wasn't until somebody presented an option that seemed like it made sense for us. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really about knowing the options. And so hearing Fred's story, I hope that it exposed some of you guys to a new option, which I think is important. Yeah. We're going to start taking questions soon, but we still have a good long time to go. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or to type them in the chat for our home audience. But I have a few more questions here. Karen, we've heard that self-care is not selfish. and yeah, right, I know. Right? That's the laugh of a person who's taking care of 3 people right now, right? Dan and I think 2 family members. How do you take care of yourself? And are you even able to?
So Jeff is very much better at that than I am, and it's a work in progress for me for sure. But we live on the same street as my mom, who's 85, my aunt, who's 88, and my uncle, who's 90. And my mom's in hospice care. My aunt just broke her neck, and my uncle probably should be get some additional support. So Jeff and I are sort of the first responders on the street. And it means that we have to really designate time for us as a couple. And Jeff's good about working out, and he plays golf, and he plays in a musical group. And I tend to take a nap. What does it look like to have self-care? But for me, helping all of you is kind of a form of self-care for me, because I'm not teaching anymore, I'm not a principal anymore, and we want the world to be better for all of you. So I'm lucky to get to volunteer for the LGS Foundation, and for me, that is a form of care for sure. The rest, I'm in therapy for that.
Yeah, I know. I always say that I'm going to need years of expensive therapy, but I haven't started yet. So
I just need to fire that therapist because it's not working.
I know. Right. Therapy I don't have time to go to. Yeah. Tiffany, what about you? How do you take care of yourself and make sure you've got the energy to do what you need to do to care for your girl?
I've had to be very determined about it. And when we were talking about small steps, I could relate so much with those small steps with just my self-care. You can't care for others if you, like I said, you cannot care for your kiddo if you cannot, if you don't care for yourself, you don't give yourself the fuel you need emotionally, physically. Sleeping in the bed in the hotel was the most wonderful self-care. Because my little girl is not here, and I slept for 8 beautiful hours. That was wonderful self-care. So I get the nap thing. But I had to be very purposeful with it and say, okay, every single month I am scheduling to go out with my friends, and I'm going to be gone longer than 4 hours, and I am not going to check the phone. If she's with her dad, she's perfectly fine. This is what I'm going to do. And so then it became, okay, I'm going to do this. And then the next step was, all right, I'm going to do that once a month. And when I get in the car, because I have a tendency to drive all the way home 35 miles with my commute, and then just my head just overthinks everything. And I'm already thinking about my daughter, and I'm already thinking of work. And it's just, this brainstorm of worry and everything else. And I have purposely made myself a happy tape, as I call it, and I put on my happy tape and I listen to it really loud. So if you come into my car, you're welcome to the concert. It's free. And I do that, but I have to be so purposeful about it. And I laugh a lot. I make myself look up happy things. You should see my little feed on there. It's like kittens doing funny things. Like, I have to, give myself a few minutes at night to just do that so that I can refuel myself. So it's just small steps, but you just have to be purposeful with it and allow yourself this. Tell yourself it's okay, because the first time you do it, first time you go out with your friends for 4 hours, you feel like you are just the worst parent ever, But it gets a little easier and you feel better.
I love this quote that if you don't take time to make time for health, you'll have to make time for disease. And so I learned this about 3 or 4 years ago as I started to get sicker and sicker, and have done the same thing. I can watch cats knock things off counters all day, right? Apparently I am fangirling an actor named Goran Visnich right now, who I just love from ER, right? Didn't know that about myself. I think finding that time, and Jen Griffin, who spoke, her and I suffer from waking up every night during what she calls the hour of self-loathing. This is like 1, 2, 3 a.m. where you wake up and think about every mistake you've ever made in your life. Mm-hmm. So I put on audiobooks. I've learned that this works for me. I put them on to fall asleep, something I've already read that I'm not that vested in. And then I'll do that again at 1 a.m. and it puts me right back to sleep instead of 2 hours of self-loathing. So
may I add something to that?
Yes.
What you said about you have to make time, especially for your health on there. I recently, in April, underwent surgery for a gastric sleeve because I was not taking care of myself. I was eating too fast. I was eating the wrong food so I could make sure I got into her. And then it was like, it's okay, I'm a little overweight. That's fine. And then it was, oh gosh, now I got to take 2 blood pressure pills. it's okay. They're pills, you know? And then it was, I'm, you know, pre-diabetic. And it was all because I wasn't making that purposeful time to take care of myself. That's not the right thing for everybody. That just was for me. Yeah, I'm off everything. My blood sugars are normal. I'm able to move with Lily more. But I had to make that decision. And I felt really bad taking that time off and being home with somebody taking care of me. For 10 days, somebody had to take care of me, and I was just like, no, this isn't gonna work. But you have to take care of yourself.
You have to.
Yeah.
We're going to take questions in just a second, so go ahead and put your hands up, and we'll get a mic to you. But I just want to ask each panel member, Diane, in the audience here, we've got really young kids. We've got kids, you know, in the middle years, transitioning, you know, to adulthood, and then adults. What words of wisdom would you speak to this crowd based on your journey? I mean, the people we have on this panel, you know, the kids range from 19 to 43, right? This is an older crowd. So what words of wisdom would you want to impart to our families here and at any stage of their journey?
Ooh,
Do you want me to come back to you?
that would be
I
great.
feel like I put you on the spot.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Karen, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I think that, number one, the kids are beautiful. Look around. You know, they're just incredible human beings. And we need to share that with the rest of the world. They're worthy of love, as Jen said so well in her presentation just a few minutes ago. And they're also worthy of our hard work to make it better. And so you're going to go through different phases where there might be a time when you can run a little walk in your area, or you can meet up with another family just to provide that hope, and maybe even make a connection where, you know, we add to those research dollars. And I want to say, don't feel bad if you're not in that space, but you will be at some point, and they're worthy of our best efforts.
What about you, John? Words of advice to the crowd, to the dads out there, maybe?
You know, for the dads, it's, you know, don't look too far ahead of, oh, what is my child going to be like in 5 years or 6 years or a year from now. You know, enjoy the moments. When you're sad, be sad. Don't feel guilty if you're having a good time or being happy. You know, enjoy the moments. And then, you know, I always say the bad times are always going to be there, but make sure you, you know, give yourself some time to have the good time and be in the moment. Because if you're not in the moment, you're thinking too far ahead, you're going to miss that, you know, one special time of the day between these seizures. All of a sudden, there's a moment of happiness, and your child's doing great. You want to take advantage of that. So, kind of live day to day. There's some things you want to plan ahead, as we've talked about, as they get older, but just enjoy each day.
I love that. I know there was this quote that going around that's like, I tried to, you know, live in the now, and Savannah does that. She's great at living in the now, and when I live in the now, I like forget to pack lunch for the next day for school. So it's like live in the now, but also plan ahead, right? Just a quick question before we keep going down the line. How many of your kids are seizing daily? Raise your hand. 4. When Brian, how many seizures was he having towards the end of his journey?
Daily.
Daily.
Yeah,
Daily.
and different kinds.
Different kinds of seizures.
Myoclonic and grand mal.
Yeah, Savannah's weekly right now, yeah. So what about you, Tiffany? Advice?
Learn to laugh.
It's good to laugh. We try to laugh. I mean, you have to laugh at the ridiculousness of
laugh,
it sometimes.
laugh. Sorry, this is twice now I've gotten all like this. Learn to laugh with your kids. They're great. Learn to laugh here with these wonderful people. Like you're talking about him being running out of the house and, you know, down the road and going into people's house. Been there, done that. You know, the pool, I'm gonna be home. She keeps saying, Mom, you go pool, you know. Learn to laugh with your kids, because we don't know, every moment you have to just take and cherish it. So, yeah, and it's great. Find your people. Find your people so you can laugh with them, you know, so that you have those connections where I understand. And I'm so feisty with, my daughter's 17 and a half, and I'm right in the middle of this process of owning my child. She's my child. You know, she came from me, so I get the feisty. I was feisty with you. And but you can laugh at it, and that's the whole point is, you know, find that humor in it and find your people. Thank you for being my people.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
We have a comment from at home. It says, "I love that you're talking about laughing while you're crying. I love
Thank
her.
you.
I love her."
Exactly.
And also your
This has
man.
been my first conference. It's very overwhelming with love,
It
and
is.
it's very overwhelming with the kids and just the information, and overwhelming in such a powerful, wonderful way. I will be at every conference from my lifetime, but yeah.
You also get an A+ for self-care on the manicure. Apparently, they're really zooming in at home there on your hand.
I know. Oh, is there? I'm like,
perfect.
thank you, thank you.
Diane, what about you? Do you have some words of wisdom for us?
I guess I just take a lot of opportunities to educate others about people with disabilities. As a person who always was drawn to people with disabilities, and a lot of people seem to appreciate that, and a lot of kids seem to appreciate it. So I take every moment to educate and create awareness for everyone so that everyone can ask the questions that they want and welcome them into that community to experience what we all are experiencing every day. And also, like, to piggyback on what Jen said, her presentation was awesome virtually, to turn that into advocacy, because it's never too early to get started planning for that future, and it takes a long time for that to happen.
And Diane has been a really wonderful advocate. She's actually responsible for our bookstore that was out there and got all of that together.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
Happy to do it.
Fred, words of wisdom from your journey?
I guess I would first say, try to create memories as much as you can, because my situation now, you know, really all I have now is memories. And I think when you're all said and done, everybody, that's all they have is memories of your loved ones. And so take time to create those memories because they'll be valuable later on, probably, not depending upon the circumstances, of course. And then I guess secondly is what I said at the beginning is, you know, we get so bound up in what our children can't do and the difficulties they have. I'll just focus on their abilities and exploit those because that's basically what I think will make them happy.
Yeah, I agree with all this advice. And sometimes it's hard. I know every year we have a social worker that comes to our house to assess how much money we get from in-home support services in California. And it feels like an exercise in talking about all the things Savannah can't do. And so celebrating the things that they can do. And I just want to add one piece of advice that I've just recently learned is to say sorry a little bit less. I think we apologize a lot. I mean, and yes, apologize. It costs nothing to be a decent human being. But I think sometimes we apologize for things. There was this lovely family, and they set up a little bed over here for their daughter who was exhausted, and they needed tube feed her. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry for being here. Is it okay if we set up a bed over here so we could still listen? And I'm like, please don't say you're sorry. Of course, you have every right to be here. Every person with LGS will never be thrown out of this meeting or asked to leave or anything. But in addition to that, I think we have a right to have space. So think about how many times we say sorry in a day, and maybe, you know, I'm trying to shift my thinking is that Savannah and I have a right to be here, and I'm sorry we inconvenienced you, but, you know, our right to be here is no less than anybody else's. So we do have some questions from home, and if you want to bring the house lights up, I can see who has, I'll ask this one first. Oh, we've got one waiting here in the back. We'll do this one first because I don't know how long I've been asking for the microphone, and then I'll ask this next one. Go for it.
It's mostly just a comment, but I started working in special education this year, and it's been like, I don't know, quite an experience seeing it from the inside as to what I thought was like just as a parent, you know. So one thing that I would mention is like I took my son out of speech, physical, and occupational therapy when he started school because I thought he was getting those services in school. But like the IEP, like we'll say like 100 minutes, but that's not really with a therapist, it's with the para, which I didn't really know that. So there's just a lot of things like that that it's good to get clear answers on from during the IEP, like who's providing these services, like stuff like that. And especially like sorry, I don't know the lady's name in the middle, but she mentioned like having 3 paras or 3 students to 1 para is really hard because the kids might be at school all day and get like 20 minutes or 30 minutes of care, which is hard to see. But it's just good to get clear answers and know exactly what's happening during the day.
And if you have specific questions too about IEPs in school, Jen Griffin, like I said, is fantastic. But I agree. I mean, the foundation's really shifting. It's thinking now about how can we get these families and these people who have all of this experience to you, you know, in meaningful ways. So watch your TikToks for the future. Let me ask this question from the virtual audience here. So Karen, what was your process for getting a nurse? It has been a real hurdle for us. Even with good insurance and Medicaid, with a Medicaid waiver, he can't even go back to his day program now because he doesn't have a nurse after he attended there for about 20 years.
Yeah, so our nurse has been with us for 22 amazing years. She's a member of our family, for sure. The process was hard and worked through a waiver, but it was actually through an agency that we found Frederica. She followed a series of people that we did not want in our home taking care of our kiddo, but now he can't go to his program because of the nurse. So it's really hard. I would say stay with it. There are also private providers, and we went through looking at those kind of people to see what we could find and where. So it's hard.
It's hard, and it's state specific. I know we can connect you with someone in your state, usually, that might have some insight into how that state works through our ambassador program. So I encourage you to reach out there. Question in the back here.
Yep. Hi. I had a 2-part question. One, I was curious for the families where you've kept your child home with you, what modifications have you had to make to your home, or did you have to move? Because we've made some modifications to our home, but you know, in the long term, it's still 2 stories. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, I'm also just curious how you navigate your extended family as your child ages. Because I'm starting to find, I don't know if it's just my anxiety, but I'm finding that more challenging, or I get more anxious when I'm going out into family situations because I'm worried about, you know, as our kids get bigger, you know, you can't cuddle them as much as you used to or scurry off to a corner. Things become a little bit more obvious, I guess. So, yeah. So 2-part. If you have made modifications to your home, and second, how you've handled your extended family, or maybe you've been lucky and no issues there.
Okay with you guys. I can address the modification thing. For all of you that have someone in a wheelchair, we have a 2-story home, and we had a lift put out front, and then we eventually were able to purchase an accessible vehicle because Lindsay's in a wheelchair all the time. Then she got bigger and heavier and taller, and we got older, and so we couldn't carry her up the stairs anymore. So we were lucky. It seems like a lot of families have the ability to utilize their extended family, and they held a benefit for our family and raised like $200,000 so that we could put it in a special needs trust and then utilize it to modify our home. So then we had a lift put in the home, and then we had one of the bathrooms made accessible. And so my husband and I pretty much figure that we'll die in that house because we're never going to get out of it because we're always going to have the accessibility to live in it. Although now that Lindsay doesn't live with us anymore, we don't use it. But it probably costed, it's $80,000 for a van, even used, and $80,000 to modify your home. But it gives you a better quality of life.
There are some states that will pay for, help to pay for home modifications, like I know in California, the regional centers, and we have a small patient assistance program. We did help a family to get one of those chair lifts, and the family was so happy they didn't have to carry their, 200-pound son up the stairs anymore to go to bed. He was been sleeping downstairs. I think it paid for a portion of that.
That helped.
But it's really about finding your state-specific pieces.
For me, I say this in all seriousness when I say this, pool noodles, okay? Which I learned from another family of a child that had epilepsy, is pool noodles. You can get them at Dollar Tree. You cut them, they go around any sharp, the corners of my house. I have no coffee table. A coffee table, it didn't matter where she was at in the room, she could manage to hit that table, So we have no coffee tables, we have pool noodles, and then you can just remove them when people come. And I've been so blessed with a huge extended family. I have no family of my own, unfortunately, so I have married into a humongous family, and they've been absolutely wonderful and welcoming, so I'm very blessed. But some of the greatest hacks for your house and modifying it with just smaller stuff, not the big stuff, mind you, came from other people. I put it on the site, like, how do you do this? And boom, there was 500. Hey, have you tried this? Have you tried pool noodles? And that's where I found, some of those things. So, put out on your website.
LGS Hacks channel.
Yes.
This is like my dream, and I'm pretty sure like 500 of these hacks are going to involve a pool noodle.
Right.
Because those are awesome. But we have another question back here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, your stories really resonate on both ends, I think, hearing about how some of you are trying to think about, how to make it work at home and really looking at your child versus others who wanted to offer independence. I think my husband and I, now she just turned 14, but I think ahead because I see a lot, unfortunately, in my professional career. I will see 75-year-old parents, bringing their 37-year-old and they're very, very sick and they come into the office and we have to help bring their child to the bathroom. And I'm thinking, what is going on at home, and hasn't anybody ever had a conversation with this family about what to do? And it really breaks my heart. And I think to myself, I don't know if I want to be in that position ever, or to put that burden ever on, my family or my children, my other well children. And it's real because I see it all the time. And I see such a value in the home-based support, but I also see the hard side of that because right now in Massachusetts, it's a crisis through the pandemic. There are no nurses. There are no people to come help watch your adults and your children all the time. It's a real problem. It's a real struggle. And there are people who are quite resourceful. I feel like I'm pretty resourceful. And Karen, it sounds like you guys are, you go through these paths, but there's a lot of parents and families that aren't. So what do you do? It's such a hole in this community about either how do we advocate to bolster home-based support services that are the right ones for our kids and adults, and versus what are opportunities for them who do want to live in some sort of assisted sort of environment where they have a little bit more independence, and dignity in that. It's such a hard space. I wish there were more options.
Yeah,
so I hope
agreed.
that your voices, which are really powerful, all 5 of you, is a way for us to make all of those options better, because it's
Yeah.
it's
So,
hard.
I'll take that one if you guys don't mind. I mean, I think we've been thinking a lot about this at the LGS Foundation, and we've spent the last, 2 years. I mean, I think I've been here 5 years, and I've been executive director for about a year and a half now, thinking just building an infrastructure that can support uplifting, people like this so they can get out and advocate. And I think advocacy is important. First, I do think there are programs out there that can help, but they are not known to us. And plus, we're overwhelmed, right? We're really overwhelmed. So I think we have to go find out what's out there. And I think that as a community, we've not really come forward in a systematic and unified way and asked for help. And the reason we haven't is because we're tired. We're so tired and we're so overwhelmed. And so the movement, I think, in the last few years is really for us to get our voices under us, to come forward, because I think there are tons of people that are providing help and helping and wanting help, but we just haven't connected with them. And then once we know what's out there, which is a conversation that we've begun here, right? And we get that information, on our website or in TikTok or on YouTube or wherever, then we can now start figuring out what we need to advocate for. And this is really our goal for the next few years. Like every year we have a theme. I'm looking at Karen on our board. We had our first year was a research year. Our first year was a brighter future year, right? It was just looking to the future, like we are getting organized here. And I promise you, nothing has ever happened and come to a group of people without them being organized and standing up for themselves. But it has to be easy. All of us can't be pulling the cart in 500 different directions, right? Like we have to come together and know what's out there. The second year was really a research year because we heard from you. Science and medicine are not helping. And even if we get the best care and have money, science and medicine are not helping. So let's get them on the right path, finding the cures. And then this upcoming year has really been focused on the best care. And then now we're starting the conversations about services and support. And so I think that the younger generation is going to benefit from this generation, even though we're paving the way still. And people like Fred already have done that in many ways. And we have a lot of work, but I think the community is going to come together and do that. So can we give our panelists a huge round of applause? Thank you.
Oh, I'm clapping.